All right, so today we're looking at Daniel 3, 8 through 30, which, if you don't know, is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. A little bit of backstory for this. In the previous chapter, Daniel had interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and after the whole thing of no one in his royal court could interpret the dream for him, so Daniel came and did, and so we know that Nebuchadnezzar has experienced firsthand what God can do through his people. And Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar that no one on earth could explain his dream to him, but God is able to explain things that we can't understand. And Nebuchadnezzar praises Daniel and says his God must be the God of gods, and if Daniel was able to reveal the mystery of his dream. And then this resulted in Daniel being put in a high position along with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, being made administrators over the province of Babylon at Daniel's request. So we know that Nebuchadnezzar knows the three of them already. They're very high up in his kingdom, as well as is Daniel. And again, like I said, he knows what God can do because he helped him out in that situation. So we'll fast forward. We'll start up at verse 8, which says, "At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, 'O king, live forever. We have issued a decree, O king, that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, O king. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold that you have set up.' Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, 'Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold that I have set up for you? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?'" So just one chapter later, Nebuchadnezzar seems to have forgotten. He had a mind lapse in of everything that just happened, and is threatening Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with the fiery furnace if they don't bow down to his statue. And I mean, he's forgotten that these three are serve the same God that helped interpret his dream and answer his questions and solve that mystery. And again, it says in verse 13, he was furious with rage, which kind of makes me think of someone like just their face is just bright red and they're just yelling and they're just super angry. You know, veins popping out of their neck and their forehead and just nothing you want to see. It's not fun. But in moments of anger, sometimes I find myself stammering and not knowing what to say or saying something I don't mean at all. But we can sometimes say the wrong thing when we're angry because we can let our emotions get the best of us. And one example I thought of this as comes from one of my favorite movies, in Home Alone, when everyone, it's at the very beginning of the movie, and they're having dinner, and Kevin's mad at Buzz because he ate all the cheese pizza, and so he's upstairs with his mom, and they're kind of having an argument, and they're both really angry. And Kevin says, "Everyone in this family hates me." To which his mom says, "Then maybe you should ask Santa for a new family." And he says, "I don't want a new family. I don't want any family. Families suck. Just stay up there. I don't want to see you again for the rest of the night." That's what his mom said, which her anger, she probably doesn't mean that she doesn't want to, well, she probably does, but she's frustrated with him. And then Kevin says, "I don't want to see you again for the rest of my whole life. And I don't want to see anyone else either," which he's pretty angry at this point. And she said, "I hope you don't mean that. You'd feel pretty sad if you woke up tomorrow morning and you didn't have a family." To which he kind of like falls back a little bit and says, "Oh, no, I wouldn't." So she says, "Then say it again and maybe it'll happen." But she says, "I hope I never see any of you jerks again." Which both of them said things they didn't mean in that situation. They let their emotions get the best of them. And Nebuchadnezzar is saying things that he doesn't mean in this, which is why anger is a big thing in this. And another characteristic of his in these verses is his doubt regarding God's power. He doubts that God could protect 3 men from burning up in a furnace, which is understandable considering where his priorities are. No one's ever really survived from living in a being thrown into a fiery furnace. But many other people have doubted God too, and not just people who didn't believe in him. And John Thomas doubted that Jesus had rose from the dead, and said he would only believe if he could see firsthand and put his hands in Jesus' side, and fingers in the holes where the nails were. And then in Luke, Zechariah doubted that his wife was going to have a baby, even when the angel Gabriel had a face-to-face conversation with him, and told him directly that it was going to happen. And as a result, he was made mute until his baby was born. And then in a similar situation in Genesis, Abraham didn't believe when he was told that Sarah was going to have a baby. So even some of the godliest people in the Bible that we know of have doubted God's ability sometimes. But even with everyone who has doubted God, there are still those who don't doubt his sovereignty, regardless of the circumstances. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego failed to doubt God throughout the entire story. And we'll pick it up at verse 16 with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God who we serve would be able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." They say, so even though Nebuchadnezzar is confronting them and threatening them, they still remain calm and respectful of his authority as king. And they say, "We do not need to defend ourselves in this matter," which is something pretty confident to say in front of the king of the country we live in. So it says, "Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude towards them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in the army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace at the king's command. And his command was so urgent, and the furnace so hot, that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace." So again, they said, "We do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter." But kind of why is this? It's because Nebuchadnezzar is not the ultimate authority that they answer to. They serve God before everyone else, and there isn't anything that could sway them from that mindset due to the strength of their faith. I'm sure this is a situation that they figured would happen at some point in their lives because of the time that they lived in. But to have the calm reaction that they had so far, I would believe that they've been praying consistently for the exact attitude they present here. We talk about prayer a lot, but I don't think everyone fully understands the power of prayer. I was listening to someone a while back who was talking about prayer, and he said, that when we think about it differently and how significant it can be, it makes a big difference. The one thing that he said that really stuck out to me was that when we pray, we are talking to God, the creator of everything around us and everyone we know, and he's listening to us. That part kind of blew my mind. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego prayed through the situation knowing exactly who they were talking to and knowing what the outcome could be if they prayed in good faith. And their whole response is full of confidence. Not confidence in their ability to withstand the heat of a blazing furnace, but confidence in their faith and in God's ability to save them and to use the situation for his glory. Their confidence even shows up in the next part when they are tied up and thrown into the fire. They make no attempt at escaping. They don't change their minds, and they took their punishment knowing that it was unjust in God's eyes. Looking back at verse 18, they say that even if God does not save them, they will not serve Nebuchadnezzar's gods or worship the golden statue. And it feels like the 3 of them weren't the least bit worried, and that takes a good amount of confidence and a strong faith to look at a blazing furnace, see the men around you die, and not cry for help. And that's the kind of faith that we should strive to have. When you're wrong, sometimes it can be hard to admit it, depending on the situation, and it can be really difficult. In an interview with NBC, Dr. Kate Kaplan, a clinical psychologist from Los Angeles, says that for some, admitting that they have made a mistake is too threatening to their sense of self, as it would cause embarrassment, shame, guilt, or challenge their character or beliefs. What people end up doing is overcompensating by denying fault and refusing ownership of their own mistakes, thereby protecting their self-image. And unfortunately, some people can't give up their sense of rightness they desire so much. And this is not the case at all for Nebuchadnezzar. And in verse 24 he says, "Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, 'Weren't there 3 men we tied up and threw in the fire?' They replied, 'Certainly, O king.' He said, 'Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods.'" So Nebuchadnezzar doesn't just see that they are casually walking around in the fire and ignore it. He leaps to his feet and in amazement, because it's like nothing he's ever seen before. In a way, he even admits that he was wrong before they step out of the furnace, saying, like, the God they worship is the God of gods and the Lord of lords. And pick it up at verse 26. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. Come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Imagine being a non-believer in that instance. Before the 3 men go into the furnace, you see it pumped up 7 times hotter than normal. You see them tied up. You see the soldiers around them drop dead at the first sense of fire. And then your king says he sees a 4th man walking around with them, and when they come out, there's no sign that they were anywhere even near a fire. You would know right then and there that the God they serve is the one you should be serving too. That would have been a pretty crazy moment in time to have been a part of. And then verse 28, then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So confidence in our own faith and in God can lead to so much more in the future. The 3 of them went from being thrown into a furnace to a promotion all on the same day, just because of their faith and what they believe. What we want, a strong faith, is achievable, and it doesn't take much beyond staying consistent in prayer and trusting God through every day of our lives. I doubt that we'll be faced with the same situation as the 3 of them, but nevertheless, the chances of us being questioned about our faith is up there, and it's important that we are prepared to stand up for our faith and for God, because we never know when the opportunity will come up.